I tell you what, for my entire adult life, the person that stood up and given the budget in that dispatch box in the building behind me has been some Tory, and year after year after year they have stolen mine and my generation's future from me. And I am so happy, so bloody happy, that for the first time in 14 years we have a woman Chancellor giving the budget, but a woman who has given us our future back, started thinking about how we're going to invest in the future of our economy, starting to think about the fact that we can't keep on with austerity, running our public services into the ground, and this is such a good day for Britain.
Frankly, I give it about 3 out of 10. Taxes are up, spending's up, the books have been cooked, and we've got a bunch of fantasy forecasts from what I call the office of incompetent forecasting. And you've seen the reaction in the financial markets. Already the cost of debt, the cost therefore of mortgages for everybody, has gone up immediately, over and above the increases from last week. And these growth forecasts, we end up at about 1.5% growth in theory. I think it'll be much lower. But that's not real growth. Per person, they're forecasting about 1%. I mean, this is embarrassing. And my fear is, yes, it sounds good if you're pouring more money into the NHS, but the NHS had never had more money. And if they don't do that with serious reforms, then it'll just go into a black hole, and we'll be here in 2 years' time. Healthcare outcomes will be as bad or worse. And, as I say, we've got to reform the way we do healthcare in this country. That's what I talked about in the general election. And in fairness, the health secretary, he's talked about using the independent sector much more. It's gone a bit quiet on that at the moment. But this budget is a budget of risk, and it's an assault on jobs. It's an assault on entrepreneurship and risk takers, small businesses. And I'm very, very worried.
Some would say that it was very good for jobs and good for working people, especially when you think about the national living wage, or you think about the tax thresholds. Looking forward to 27, 28, those are going to be unfrozen.
That's 4 years away. I mean, we're all talking about now. The reality is everybody's feeling poorer and taxes are up. And if you make higher taxes for businesses employing people, guess what? They'll employ less people. They won't increase your wages as much. So, money doesn't grow on trees. It has to be paid for. It has to be created. And so, no, this is an assault on jobs. It's an assault on small businesses, on risk takers. There's a little bit of good news, though, trying to sort of find some good news. The reduction on beer, and I therefore hope Guinness, which is my tipple, is important.
1 penny.
1 penny. Look after the pennies. The pounds look after themselves. And freezing fuel duty is better than raising it. We've been campaigning to reduce it, but at least that is some good news. But I am desperately, desperately worried.
I think it's a bit of a missed opportunity, unfortunately. I was really looking for a budget that helped make this country a fairer country and to build a green economy. And I think the Chancellor, she missed some chances. The big thing that I and the Greens have been pushing for in the run-up to this budget was for her to make the tax system fairer. So to ask the really super rich, the multimillionaires and billionaires, those who can easily afford to pay a bit extra through a wealth tax to fund public services that we all benefit from. This is something that an increasing number of people, not just the Greens, have been pushing for. There was an open letter signed by 28 MPs a week or so ago. There's lots of different organisations backing it, including millionaires themselves. There's a group called the Patriotic Millionaires saying, please tax us more. I really think it's an idea whose time has come, but unfortunately it doesn't look like Rachel Reeves got the memo. I was pleased to see Rachel Reeves has increased capital gains tax. That's something the Greens were pushing for as well, although she hasn't equalised it with income tax, which is what we were saying would be the best way of doing it. So at the moment, people who get most of their income from the sale of assets, so that is by definition the wealthy, those who are sitting in their armchair and the money's just rolling in, they're paying less tax than people who earn a living from going to work every day. I don't think that's fair. I think we should equalise those levels of tax rather than giving that big that big loophole to the super rich. And that would have been part of the story, and a wealth tax would have been the other part of the story. And, I know that the Conservatives left the economy in a difficult state. And Rachel Reeves made that point 5 or 6 times, I think, in her speech. I don't know how many. And it's true. But she was making out as if there was no alternative. But actually, We are in one of the richest economies in the world still. We have a lot of wealth in our economy. The trouble is that it's unequally distributed.
Many people have been complaining about a potential tax rate on millionaires. Is this something that would make you consider leaving the UK or perhaps stop investing here?
No, it isn't. It didn't happen, did it? I think it's a real shame. I think there's a right-wing kind of media storm of the last few weeks to make it difficult for Labour to do sensible things on tax, like a 2% tax on people with £10 million or more in accumulated wealth would raise £24 billion apparently, would only affect 20,000 people. I mean, that's a fraction of the 60 million people that live here, and there are millions of people that live here and can't afford to feed themselves and their kids and stuff like that. And then you've got people with all of this money who really wouldn't miss 2% of assets over 10 million.
This budget means that an average nurse will be paying a higher rate of income tax than a millionaire. Do you think that Labour could have been more ambitious?
Yeah, well, that was the situation before the budget. I mean, I've been arguing for a long time that actually income derived from investments in property or shares or that kind of stuff, we call that capital gains, so we shouldn't. We should call it income, and it should be tax paid at the rate of income tax. At the moment, a nurse, an average worker, will pay nearly 50% of their earnings in tax, whereas a business will pay 24% of their profit, not their income. And the richer you are, the less you pay. Rishi Sunak's last tax return that we saw before he left office was 20%. He paid 20% tax, and this is the thing that I really want to see happen in our country now under Labour. This is not the only chance they'll have to do that. It's to balance the tax system so that we all pay the same rate of tax on income.
What I feel about the tax system is we tax people who work, who get an income from work, but we don't tax people to the same extent who get an income from wealth. That is a key problem that we've got as a society, whether it's you're getting money from dividends, from profits, or in other ways. If it's coming from your wealth, perhaps inherited, you tax less than if you were working. We need to see a shift. Now, we saw a little bit of that with the Chancellor, but I'd like to see more in coming budgets.
And that's your definition of working people?
It's a way of avoiding the question of who is a working person and who is not. Maybe we could frame it differently as our leadership. Income from wealth, surely it should be paid at least the same level of tax as income from work. We call Labour implies work. We should be encouraging people to work by, tackling this. Really, it's quite unfair, I think.
I think there are a number of big corporations where the Labour Party could have been more ambitious. So we had said, for example, they should have reversed the tax cuts that were given to the big banks by the Conservatives. We have called for a tax on the water companies before, using that to invest in fixing the sewage scandal, which is plaguing our waterways around the country. We had also been talking about all sorts of other taxes, like raising taxes on big tech companies as well. So there are plenty of options that the government could have looked at. And they could have done that instead of, for example, raising the national insurance contributions on small businesses who I think are going to really struggle as a result of this measure.
Would that have been a preference for you then, for Labour to go after the sort of the conglomerates rather than going after small... Well, I mean, they're not going after small businesses really, are they, though? Because they have raised the threshold there.
Well, the national insurance contributions will affect all businesses, and it will particularly affect very small businesses. By raising the allowance, they're giving a little bit back, but it's nowhere near enough to compensate for the huge increase in national insurance contributions. So we're very concerned at a time when the government says it wants to see growth, they're actually restricting the ability of small businesses to actually grow. And we as a party believe that our small businesses are the engine of growth, they're the engine of our economy, they're the lifeblood of our community. We would have much preferred to have seen more incentives and more support for small businesses, and instead for the government to look at those really big corporates that have made millions, if not billions of pounds in profits, and who could afford to pay a little bit more to support our public services to get back on their feet.
Look, on the face of it, I think that putting some big investment into the NHS is long overdue. We've been arguing for it for ages. Prior to the election, we were saying to both the Labour Party and the Tories, you need to be honest about public services. We need to have an honest discussion about how we fund them. So I think they surprised everyone a wee bit with the scale of the money they're putting into the NHS. I guess for a lot of folk, though, who are sitting at home, if you're a pensioner, you'll be looking at it going, well, I'm still going to be getting gubbed by the winter fuel allowance getting taken away. I'm still going to be very cold this winter. If you're a family that's got kids in poverty, two-child cap's still there. And if you're a small business that employs lots of people, particularly younger people as well, you're probably going to be forced to either lower wages or hike up the cost of your produce. And I guess that's not a great thing. So whilst there's maybe some good things in terms of investment, there's also some other things that aren't so great as well, and for most folk I think it's probably the latter which is going to hit home the hardest.
It's a step in the right direction, but there's much more that can be done, and we've called, for example, for the government to think about things like a wealth tax. We're very good at taxing those who get a pay slip every month and pay their tax pay as you earn. We're much less effective at taxing those who get their income through stocks and shares or through property. So obviously there's more to be done, but I think it's right that the Chancellor's moved in the right direction. Right as well that she's committed to investing more resources into HMRC, into people to clamp down on tax avoidance and tax evasion. Far too many people get away with not paying enough tax in this country.
There was a lot of talk before the budget about the definition of working people. Did that definition ever confuse you?
No, it doesn't confuse me at all. It's someone who goes out to work and gets the majority of their income through the pay packet every month. And again, there was a lot of red herrings. I mean, a lot of focus in the media about those who earn over £100,000 a year. 4% of people who go out to work earn over £100,000 a year. Now, we can have an argument about whether or not they should be taxed more or not, but for the vast majority of ordinary working people, this is just a semantic argument. At the end of the day, if it looks like a worker, you're paid like a worker, you are a worker.
Just want to ask you finally about Grangemouth, which is one of the, it's an oil refinery where many jobs are about to go. Do you think that Labour should be more interventionist?
Well, this is where I think Labour have got to think about long and hard about how its industrial strategy actually translates into real jobs on the ground. And I know that Unite have made this point directly to the Chancellor when we had a meeting with Rachel Reeves a couple of weeks ago. And it's absolutely right the government is investing in industrial strategy, right to sort of identify those parts of the economy where we need to create and protect and sustain jobs. But if you're a worker in Grangemouth, or indeed a worker at Scunthorpe or British Steel, or working in oil and gas, you're seeing promises of industrial strategy coming down the road next year. What does it mean to me in my job right now? And I do think there's real need for government to work with unions and employers to protect as many jobs as possible.
We need to be reaching for the stars because we've got such a massive housing crisis in this country. Too many people living in temporary accommodation, too many people unable to get onto the housing ladder. So having that big, bold, ambitious housing target and starting to put that money aside from the government in order to make sure that we hit it, standing up to those NIMBYs who keep telling us that we shouldn't be building in those areas, they're really important elements to make sure that the future generation can have a nice, decent, safe house to live in, just like the last generation did.
We've also heard today that there'll be a 2% increase on stamp duty for second homes. Is it a concern for you that if you do build these 1.5 million homes, that perhaps buy-to-let landlords will just scoop them up?
That's increasingly something that we're concerned of. Look, there are some people that are perfectly happy and will always be perfectly happy private renting for their entire life. There's some people who will want to live in some form of social housing or council housing, and it's good that we've heard some extra money in the budget today in order to support with that. But for many people, they really want that ability to buy their first home. And we need to create a housing market that isn't an investment vehicle for people to have 2 or 3 homes and make a profit off them, but really it is a roof over people's heads that if it's possible, they can own it. And we need to build an economy that supports that, and that's one of the things that we've heard Rachel supporting today.